If you're thinking about moving to Portland, Oregon, and you work remotely, this video is for you. Stay tuned to learn more. Hey, what's up everybody? This is Paul Clem with the Oregon Relocation Team coming to you from Portland, Oregon. And in this video, we're going to talk about working remotely, working from home in Portland, Oregon. Obviously, this is an arrangement that has become more and more common. It's increased like 300 or 400% around the country in the last 2 or 3 years, 3 or 4 years, really since 2020. A lot of people went to working remotely, working from home, and either never returned or returned partially. So when you look at Portland, Portland is ranked 6th nationally for its share of workers that work remotely or work from home. Now, it's not specified if that is 100% remote or partially remote. I'm going to take that as at least partially remote. Now, there is a little bit of a movement toward kind of going back to the office. You know, a lot of these big companies or even small companies have, you know, long-term leases, and they just have these, you know, vacant spaces that they need to, you know, get people back in to at least justify the expense. There's also, of course, you know, the dynamic of, you know, just being around people, what that does for productivity versus being at home in your pajamas all day when you could, you know, take random breaks to do laundry and things like that. Maybe you can relate to that. I certainly can. But at any rate, Portland, again, ranks 6th nationally for having about 21% of its share of workers here in Portland working remotely. Now, that is the highest percentage of any West Coast city. Denver is like in the top 1 or 2, but purely West Coast, Portland ranks number 1 when it comes to remote work, even more so than the Bay Area. Now, there's not a huge discrepancy. So if you look at Seattle and San Francisco and LA and San Diego, it's all around 20%, but again, Portland is right up over 21% of its workforce working remotely. Now, hey, if this is your first time to the channel or you've been here and you haven't already and you want to get more videos like this, make sure to hit the subscribe button, tap the little bell to get notified every time we drop a new video. Okay, so what we're really going to talk about in this video is Portland a good place to work if you are a remote worker? And I think there's a lot of things that you can look at. Everybody's lifestyle and circumstance is different. The things that they, you know, like to get into from time to time, the things that they want to have access to. You know, I think in and of itself, if you're, you know, working remotely, it more kind of has to do with, you know, inside of your home and how you can create the experience that is a good one for you, being a remote worker. So that's going to be pretty consistent anywhere in the country that you would live. But working remotely in Portland, I think there's a lot of things that we can look at. I mean, culturally, geographically, as far as the layout of everything, things that you have immediate access to in particular. If you're working from home, it's a lot easier to walk out of your front door, whether you're taking a break or things that you do before or after work. You know, that's going to make a big difference than if you are commuting to, you know, a downtown area or whatever it may be on a regular basis. So there's a lot of things that I think we can evaluate looking at Portland and whether or not it is a good place ultimately for remote work. And of course, if you are thinking about moving to Portland and you do work remotely, or you will be working remotely, where you live in the Portland metro area is going to make a big difference as far as what that day-to-day experience is going to be. And if you are thinking about moving to Portland, and if you want to talk more about, you know, neighborhoods and suburbs and things to do and cost of living and what the process ultimately might be like buying a home in the Portland metro area, give us a call, send us a text, shoot us an email, or click the link down below in the description of the video. Schedule a Zoom call with us, we can talk all about it. So what are some of the things that contribute to Portland having a higher percentage of remote workers? We'll dig into some of this toward the end of the video too, but what are some of the things that potentially make Portland a better place to be a remote worker in and of itself? You know, obviously there's going to be jobs here locally that offer remote work, but what are some of the reasons why somebody would take their work with them and decide to relocate to the Portland metro area? So number one is Portland is an introvert's paradise. This is an area that is not flashy. This is an area that is not boastful. I think it's a relatively modest culture. Obviously, the weather contributes to a lot of time spent indoors. Now, we have a lot of great outdoor activities, and that's one of the main reasons why people relocate to really the Pacific Northwest, is you get 4 seasons and you have all this opportunity to get outdoors and do stuff. But I think by and large, at the end of the day, the culture of Portland, and again, really the Pacific Northwest, is people are at least skewed a little bit more introverted. So maybe there's a little bit of an expectation here, or less required of you socially, to where, hey, being home a lot more, working at home, just kind of being in your own environment. It's going to be raining and cold a lot of the year too. You can stay in your PJs all day, wear sweatpants. This is going to be a really good place for somebody who is a little bit more introverted. Now, even if you do skew a little more toward introversion, everybody needs to get out, get some fresh air, be amongst people from time to time. So I think Portland has a really nice walkability to it, and that's not just in the traditional sense of being able to walk out your front door and go to a coffee shop or go get lunch or go to a bar, but it's also going to be just getting out and enjoying nature. So obviously within 45 minutes, 90 minutes plus drive any direction in Portland, you can get to some really nice hikes, and you can get to the ocean, you can get to the mountains. There's so much to do in terms of outdoor activities. But just locally, whether you are in the city or in a suburb or in more of an outlying rural area, there's going to be a lot of really nice natural green spaces, walking trails, parks, and places just to get out and enjoy nature. So now, kind of like anywhere else that you could live, if you're in more of an urban environment, or even in a suburb, if you live more toward kind of the city center or core of a suburb in the Portland metro area, there's a higher likelihood that you can get out and, again, walk to a coffee shop or walk to a little grocery store, and do some of these things where you can actually interface with a lot more people, and it's a little more bustling, and you can kind of engage in some of these more social activities on foot. But overall, this is just a really good part of the country to live if you like to spend time outside, even when it's raining, even in the winter. The winter, and the colder months is relatively mild, so there's a lot of good opportunity to get outdoors, whether you want to be with people or not. And if you're working from home, odds are you're working in a place where you can walk down the street to go to a park, or potentially walk down the street to go to a coffee shop, or whatever it may be. Whereas if you're in an office, unless you are kind of in a city, but a lot of these jobs are in like business parks. I mean, you get outside and, it's just like concrete jungle, all these big office buildings, there's a little less to it. So, if you're working remotely in the Portland metro area, you have a ton of access to all kinds of stuff at your doorstep. Now I alluded to this, but just to hammer the point home, I think the weather makes this a really good place to be a remote worker. And a lot of that is because we do have these times of year where it's gray, it's cloudy, it's overcast, the weather is very moody, it can be raining. I mean, you can have snow and ice in some of the winter months, but I would say on the flip side of that, being able to get outside when it's nice and sunny, even when we hit like 60 degrees and a little bit of sunshine, it's very nice to have the flexibility to be able to get outside. And again, Portland, living in this area, it's very conducive for that type of thing. It can also be an enormous distraction, where I would imagine if you lived in an area that's sunny 24/7, Southern California, Arizona, places like that, you kind of just, it's sunny every day. Now, it might be really, really hot sometimes a year, so you don't want to necessarily be spending a ton of time outside. But I think living in a place like this, because the nicer months weather-wise are so nice and so pleasant outside of, a few stretches of 90 plus, maybe up over 100 degrees, that it can be a little bit maybe tempting, or a little bit more of a distraction, a little bit tempting to maybe ditch out work a little early and maybe spend a little more time outside than you should be, maybe hitting your productivity a little bit. Now, the next thing is a little more of a reason I think that could contribute to a higher percentage of remote workers, and that's not necessarily companies here that offer remote work necessarily. Portland has a really big culture of solopreneurs and self-starters and side hustle extraordinaires. I think there's a lot of people that kind of always have something going, or they're working on building a little small business. And I wouldn't be surprised if a good percentage of people who report working from home, maybe doing something for themselves as a self-employed person, also have a job waiting tables or bartending or something like that, which Portland has a ton of local restaurants and bars and breweries and things like that. So there's an abundance of service industry jobs. And I would say, just to give you a little perspective about Portland, again, there are a lot of people who are kind of entrepreneurial and are doing their own thing, but doing something else on the side to support themselves, or vice versa. So there's, I think, probably a lot of people who do work from home to some degree, doing one thing, and then maybe do have kind of a day job, so to speak, elsewhere. Another thing that could contribute to Portland being a good place to work from home is that it has a pretty dense core. And that's probably going to be pretty consistent anywhere in the country when you look at a city, a metro area, and how it's sprawled. I mean, Portland is relatively sprawled, but if you are in this dense core, this kind of urban center in Portland, there are at least a half a dozen, probably more, center points of neighborhoods that are really fun, really hip, have a lot to do, good food, little shops that you can get out and walk around and get coffee, whatever it may be. So there's a lot of opportunity for that living in Portland, and not just in the downtown area. There's a lot of areas in Portland proper where you could live and really have this kind of urban residential environment that you're in, where at your doorstep you have access to a ton of stuff on foot. And that kind of goes back to the walkability sense of things. But I think overall too, even with this denser core of Portland, where it's not just Portland proper, but also the outlying suburbs, all of these outlying suburbs, for the most part, have a little downtown core where in a lot of cases you can walk to, or at least have very quick, easy access to, driving a lot of cool stuff, not just big box stores, not just kind of your run-of-the-mill suburban experience. I think there's a lot of kind of character even in the more suburban settings, where maybe you might not be in the big city, but you're still gonna have access to a lot of cool stuff in your immediate area, and it's easy enough to get around. So let's say you lived in Tigard, for example, which is kind of your run-of-the-mill suburb for the most part. There might not be as much in your immediate area, but you might live in Tigard because you work remotely sometime, and then the office where you work is located in Tigard, for example, so it makes more sense to live there. Now, if you were in Tigard, you're still going to be able to pretty easily drive to Lake Oswego or Portland or up into Beaverton. Even in Tigard, you have like Bridgeport Mall or Washington Square Mall. So I think with any suburb or kind of outlying area around the city, you can point to a lot of the things around it, and say, it's not necessarily looking at it from a commute perspective, but if you are going to be spending a lot more time locally, kind of where you live, and that's also where you work, it's still a consideration of okay, and maybe even more so, the more remotely or the more remote work you engage in, what's around me, what's nearby, and maybe not necessarily on foot, but what can I drive to within a 5 to 10 minute range to, again, kind of contribute to that work-life balance. So for people that we work with who are relocating to Portland, either they are bringing their job with them and they work remotely, or they're getting a job in the Portland metro area and they may or may not be working remotely. So of course, if you are working for a company that has regional offices or is headquartered in the Portland metro area, there's a pretty good chance that they offer some level of remote work, kind of just like anywhere else, to some degree. A lot of that comes down to industry and company culture and things like that. So there's a ton of variation here as far as what that circumstance may be. But again, you're either bringing your remote job with you or working for a company here in the Portland metro area who offers remote work. Now, if that's the case, you probably will be going into the office from time to time, monthly, a couple times a week, splitting time, anything in between. So looking at where those companies are, looking at your commute, what makes the most sense, is the area where that company is an area where you could see yourself living, Or, is that distance 5 miles, 10 miles, 20 miles potentially, as far as the areas that interest you relative to, again, where that company actually is. And that's definitely something that we want to look at and evaluate. And you could either be on the winning end of that, or it might be really, really inconvenient. So that's something that we want to definitely dig into with people. Again, even if they are working remotely, but will be commuting from time to time, we really want to look at those distances and see what makes the most sense. Now, by and large, there's really just kind of like a handful of areas where you have a ton of commercial development, where you have these businesses located. Of course, downtown Portland, you have up by the airport, you have a lot of business park development in Tualatin, along 72nd in Tigard, and of course the Silicon Forest, which probably is going to represent the highest percentage of companies that offer remote work just by nature of, the industry that you're in, mostly being tech, both hardware and software. And the Silicon Forest is going to be on the west side of the Portland metro area, in Beaverton, mostly in Hillsborough, in that Tualatin Valley area in Washington County. So this does present you with a lot of options as far as where you could live. But again, if you wanted to be in a more suburban area, but your job was downtown, that's certainly something that we want to look at as far as how we can come up with the best scenario geographically. So something that's a little bit of an unanswered question is, why does Portland have a higher percentage of workers that work remotely? It's going to be either one of two things. It's going to be that there's a higher percentage of companies in the Portland metro area that offer remote work, or people are choosing to move to Portland and bring their work with them, and they're choosing to move here because of, fill in the blank. Their family's here, they're from here, they like the quality of life, the nature, whatever it may be. And it's tough to say, whether it's more one than the other, but for sure, most of the people that, at least a majority, over 50% of the people that we work with helping relocate to the Portland metro area are working remotely, bringing their work with them, and they're choosing to move to Portland to live here because of any number of reasons. Now, maybe you've seen a lot about Portland's population declining in the last 3 or 4 years. So you have this trajectory of remote work increasing significantly, since 2020. Since that time too, you also have Portland's population declining. So there's a lot of people moving for different reasons, but there are for sure still a lot of people moving to the area, just not as high of a rate. Although it was just reported that from 2023 to 2024, Portland did see a slight population increase. So maybe the tides are turning a little bit. Now, Portland's economy is dominated by tech and healthcare and education and public sector roles. Also, manufacturing is really big, but a lot of these industries really do cater more to kind of that work from home, remote work dynamic. So a lot of these industries are really well suited for it. So there definitely is that aspect of it too. Now, working remotely obviously presents its challenges, and not everybody likes it. You can definitely get a little bit of cabin fever. That could even graduate to like a kind of Stockholm syndrome in a way. And so, is Portland in and of itself, are there things about Portland that make remote work better or easier in terms of lifestyle and other things that you can do to kind of offset, whereas you might be sitting at home, for a ton of time throughout the week? What are some of the things that you can get out and do to kind of, contribute to that work-life balance? So if you're thinking about moving to Portland, whether you're working remotely or not, but if you want to talk about areas, neighborhoods, suburbs, whatever it may be, if you have any questions about the home buying process, if you want to talk about what you can get for your dollar, what areas are going to be best to focus on, give us a call, send us a text, shoot us an email, or click the link down below in the description of the video. Schedule a Zoom call with us. We can talk all about it. If this video was helpful, make sure to hit the like button. That helps us out a lot. If you want to get more videos like this, make sure to hit the subscribe button, tap the little bell to get notified every time we drop a new video. As always, we really appreciate you watching, and until next time, we'll talk to you later.